Welcome back to another episode of the Behavioral Economics and Marketing Podcast series. This is Sandra Thomas-Comenole. Season 2 is all about behavioral economics and marketing leadership. Last week I discussed the concept of pent-up demand in the travel industry. This week I will go a little deeper into a white paper I recently published on Are we experiencing pent-up demand in the travel industry? While this may seem very specific, the concepts discussed will be relatively transferable to many industries and across applications. To give a little background on the situation, on March 11, 2020, the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a pandemic. In the days and weeks to follow, life as we knew it came to a screeching halt as quarantine orders and safer at home campaigns became the daily news. In the midst of this, the travel and tourism industry was caught in a whirlwind of bad. New worldwide travel bookings steeply declined while existing bookings were canceled, leaving marketing professionals and business executives to make hard decisions on messaging, staffing, and even closing. Through it all, travel and tourism organizations have held on to the idea that pent-up demand currently exists and travel will come back swiftly upon reopen. We are now almost a year into the COVID-19 pandemic, and this battle cry is still being heard, which leaves one to question whether pent-up demand exists in the travel industry, the factors that affect travel demand through these times, and what the release of pent-up demand will look like for travel companies. My white paper explores the question, are we currently experiencing pent-up demand, through 3 data-driven studies. The first study lays groundwork for understanding and interpreting pent-up demand as it has existed in the past. The 2 subsequent studies focus on travel destinations that have opened to tourist arrivals and the travel behavior exhibited as a result. In the last episode, we discussed pent-up demand in a little more depth. To give a summary, pent-up demand is a buildup of demand for goods and services in an economy where consumers are unable or unwilling to make purchases to satisfy the demand at the present time. Pent-up demand is generally indicated by a relative period of growth that follows a restriction in sales. Pent-up demand and the subsequent release will vary across industries and based on a variety of factors. To understand how travel behaviors are displayed during intervals of pent-up demand and the ensuing release of pent-up demand, it is important to study how the diffusion of pent-up demand has looked in past circumstances. Though there are no circumstances that closely relate to the travel industry during COVID-19, an example of pent-up demand in the travel industry can be seen in a study of travel behavior post-September 11, 2001. In Study 1, I utilized the U.S. International Air Passenger Statistics Report 2000 to 2004 dataset to understand the pattern of travel behavior post 9/11 as compared to the prior year. There were several key findings in this study. The interesting one was that the release of pent-up demand was characterized by an initial bubble, but then took several years for the international air travel to reach 2000 numbers. The initial bubble occurred a few months after 9/11, during the holiday season. This time period experienced a higher than usual upward progression, reaching a high of 97% year over year. While international air travel did not experience growth year over year, it does signify that there are a variety of intrinsic and extrinsic factors that contribute to the course that the pent-up demand diffusion takes. Study 2 considers several U.S. national parks traveler behaviors in relation to the opening and closing of the parks due to COVID-19. One of the key findings for Study 2 was that Mount Rushmore performed really well, all things considered, during the months of April and March of 2020, because it didn't close to visitors as other destinations and attractions had. April was, however, the lowest month, hitting 68% year over year in terms of visitor arrivals, which is only a slight loss when compared to most destinations and attractions during that time period. Another key point from Study 2 is that none of the parks experienced an initial pent-up demand release bubble, as in the case of post-9/11 travel. Instead, the parks that were studied experienced an upward trend resulting in monthly year-over-year growth. This, however, could turn into a bubble-shaped curve as more and more international alternatives become available. Study 3 considers travel to the Republic of Croatia, from the USA, and all foreign visitors source markets. This was an interesting case study because though American travel consumers did travel to Croatia during 2020, it was very few compared to 2019 numbers. However, under the all foreign visitors category, we see that there were much larger year over year percentages, hitting 48% year over year in July. This can largely be attributed to travelers from the European Union, as there were fewer barriers to entry. One of the larger barriers to entry for USA traveler was a lack of direct flights from USA to Croatia. This was even more difficult for travelers that weren't flying from gateways. For example, a traveler traveling from Denver might have to stop over on the East Coast, such as in New York City, as well as another destination in Europe, such as in Germany or the UK. This alone is enough to stop travelers, especially if they have high anxiety with regards to air travel during a pandemic. But there was also a tricky situation with time-sensitive testing. These barriers to entry, as well as other factors, played a part in the low year-over-year numbers for travel from the USA to Croatia. To read more about my research and findings, download my white paper, Are We Experiencing Pent-up Demand in the Travel Industry? Available on Amazon. Wrapping it up, understanding how we as humans make decisions is an important part of marketing and leadership. Behavioral economics is the study of decision making and can give keen insight into consumer behavior and help to shape your marketing mix. Pent-up demand is a buildup of demand for goods and services in an economy where consumers are unable or unwilling to make purchases to satisfy the demand at the present time. This generally occurs during times of economic uncertainty, such as a recession. In this episode, we covered pent-up demand in the travel industry during COVID-19 in 3 research studies and their findings from my recent white paper, Are We Experiencing Pent-up Demand in the Travel Industry? Stay tuned for the next episode when I jump into ways that marketing professionals and executive leaders can leverage pent-up demand to realize business growth. Thank you for listening to another episode of Behavioral Economics and Marketing. This is Sandra Thomas-Comenole.